I don't know how many of you were good students, but do you remember growing up? We had this classical, at least I had this classical education where we would be taught a lesson over a period of time, usually a couple of weeks, and then at the end of that time, we would be tested on it, tested on the material. And so we went through all sorts of emotions, usually ignoring the lessons throughout the weeks, and then we got to the test part, and suddenly we panicked, and we had to start studying really hard in order to pass the test. And usually in middle school, high school, we had those multiple choice answers. And then when I got to graduate school, in 2010, our professor still handed us a blue book full of lines that we had to write on. And so there was no more guessing. We had to actually know our material. Tests cause a lot of anxiety. Tests, for some people, love it. People love tests. Some, not everybody, and I would say not the majority, love tests. I was a person that, I didn't love them, but I wasn't as bothered by them. But I still crashed to study for tests because I was one of the people that ignored most of the lessons leading up to it. But we get to this part of Lent, our Lenten journey, and we've been through a lot. We have entered the wilderness, like I mentioned, and we've gone through a whole bunch of things. We've hit a valley. We've been through some low points. And then the transformation process started to occur. We surrendered and we started experiencing God in a new way. We started connecting with the world around us, and now we're starting to feel a little better. We feel like we're being built up. That old army quote, they break us down in order to build us back up. You know, have you ever heard of that? We kind of feel like we're in that. We've been through this process for a while, and all of a sudden we see God all around us, and we feel the connection all around us, and we're starting to feel a little good about ourselves and about where we are in our journey. But we're not through it yet. There still is a few more hurdles to go. We've been through a lot, but I can promise you that there's more to come. In the Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling wrote about the law of the jungle. Well, I think there's a law of the wilderness as well. And that law of the wilderness is just when you start to feel yourself being built up, you start to be confident and feel self-assured about the transformational process that you've been through, there's going to come a test. It's that test at the end of the journey that we usually experience. If we're not tested, how are we going to know if we're truly changed? How are we going to know that this Lenten journey has been a real transformational process? This is a refiner's fire, after all. Think of a stress test. Sometimes when you're done with something, you need to test it to make sure the process is fully complete. And I believe that as we journey through the wilderness, we start to be tested. God allows tests to come our way to make sure that we have fully been transformed through this process. And I think Jesus' story in the wilderness gives us a good example of the ways that we are going to be tested. Let's look at the story. The Spirit guides Jesus into the wilderness, and for 39 days, there's nothing there. We don't know what happens in those 39 days. That's kind of what we've been imagining throughout this series about what Jesus might have gone through. But then on the last day, here comes the devil in his top hat and his tuxedo, walking with a cane, that great kind of sly character, this trickster character. Suddenly he comes up to Jesus, who's been fasting. He hasn't been eating. He hasn't been drinking. And he has this initial test and temptation. He says, if you are the Son of God, then command this stone to become a loaf of bread. You're hungry. Just command this stone to become bread, and this hunger will go away. Your appetite will be satiated. You'll be all good. See, the devil here is exploiting Jesus' very real basic human needs. What we're going to learn is these tests often hit us in our vulnerable points. Where we're the most vulnerable is where these tests are likely to come from. So here's Jesus, the Son of God, who has the power of God. Just turn this rock into bread and get this over with. See, hunger is one of our human needs that we have to have in order to survive. It's built deep into our instincts for hunger. You've heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the very basic level is food, water, sleep, and sex. That's the very basic human needs as human beings, what we need to survive. And the devil is exploiting that to try to find a way to get to Jesus. And so he's trying to exploit the power of Jesus being the Son of God and to satiate his hunger. But Jesus doesn't give in to that. Jesus refuses. But the point is that the devil is asking Jesus to exploit his position in the world to satiate his hunger. How might we be tested on our basic needs as we go through this journey? Whatever it looks like, what are our basic human needs? I can guarantee you that something along those lines are going to come our way as we seek to be transformed in the wilderness. But after Jesus passes this test, the devil then moves on to the second test, the second temptation. The devil leads him up and shows him in an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And the devil says to him, "To you I will give all this authority and their glory. For it has been given over to me, and I give it to anyone I please. If you then will worship me, it will be all yours." That's a pretty tough offer. We forget how powerful glory, power, wealth, and control is over us. The devil offers Jesus the power of Caesar, all the kingdoms of the world, all the immense worldly wealth that the world has will be at Jesus' beck and call, will be at his fingertips. The unquestioned power and the worldwide fame will become Jesus's in an instant. Just imagine this temptation. How many people have fallen victim to not even this temptation, but just a slice of it? Everything can be mine. I will have complete control over my world, and everyone will know me. I'll be able to walk into a place and people will know me, might be scared of me, will be offering me everything because I have the power. We see this trope over and over in history. People falling victim for more wealth, more power, more glory, more fame. Here with Jesus, the temptation is dramatic because the devil is asking Jesus for his worship. You just have to compromise a little on your so-called values. Just turn your allegiance over to me and you can have all this. Well, I would venture a bet that it'll come to us not quite that dramatic, but just asking us to make small little adjustments to our values. Just chip away at a few little values so we can get more and more and more. And then suddenly, someday we'll be standing there and everything will be broken. Glory, power, wealth, and control are areas of great vulnerability for us as human beings. And it's likely going to be a test that we're going to face as a human being as we move into this transformational process, through this transformational process. It's a test, and it's a dangerous test. And Jesus passes this one. So then the devil then goes to the third and the final test. Scripture says, "Then the devil led him to Jerusalem and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple and said to him, 'If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to protect you. And on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone.'" Here we see how powerful a tool religion can be. It can be used in a variety of ways to test us. See, what the devil is asking Jesus to do is to prove who he is, to prove that what God says will be, that God is honest in his promises and God's promises. See, but I believe that our job here, God, on this earth, God doesn't need us to prove that God is true and honest in God's work and promises. We don't have to prove anything about God to anybody. That's not our role here. Our role here as human beings is to spread the love of God, to spread the grace and mercy that God offers us. Our job here is to show how powerful an effect our faith can have in our life, and to be able to pass that on to people around us. But we don't have to prove that God makes these promises and will keep it. But the devil is asking here for Jesus to test God. If Jesus were to jump, would God honor that promise that angels would swoop down and not even let his toe dash upon a rock? It's a test on how we will use our faith and how strong our faith is. If we truly understand who God is to us, it's a test. But Jesus passes this test. And he shows us that the way that we are supposed to be in this world is not to prove anything to anyone, but to be who God has called us to be in this world. See, Jesus has been in the wilderness for 40 days. And we see a transformation from the time he was baptized to the time he leaves the wilderness. Jesus goes through some things. Jesus has to go through, probably, as I posited in the very beginning, probably an understanding of who he is. For the first time, Jesus heard God speak to him, calling him the beloved Son of God. Up to that point, God has been talking to everybody except Jesus. And so Jesus probably had to come to terms with who he was in the eyes of God. And he had to be strengthened throughout this time in the wilderness. Would Jesus have passed these tests at the very beginning? I don't know. But it seems like this wilderness was a strengthening process, a transformational process, to where Jesus was able to identify that these were indeed tests, that the transformation process that he'd been experiencing has given him the strength not just to resist, but to counter, and also to know that he has now the strength and the wisdom to go out from this wilderness into the world and do his ministry. Just like we had in school. We go through a journey in the wilderness, and it's a transformational process. And it's a process of a refiner's fire where we're getting strengthened. We're gathering more wisdom. When through the connections that we make, we learn more and more about ourselves and the world around us. We start to see God in new and incredible ways. We start to see the face of God in different ways than we ever have seen the face of God before. And it's through these tests that we can be confident that we are ready to exit the wilderness and move into the world doing what God has called us to do, being who God has called us to be. But it's not without this wilderness that we might have the confidence to do that. And so these tests are important. These tests are key in our transformational process. And it's important that we're able to identify these tests as they come to us, to realize that these are indeed tests. And they're likely going to be very alluring. They're likely going to hit us in our most vulnerable spaces. And so we have to understand, we get the opportunity to understand how we need to combat these tests, and whether or not we're ready to move on, or whether or not we need to spend some more time studying, spending some more time preparing ourselves to go just another bit of time in the wilderness before we're able to fully go out in the strength and the transformation that God offers us. These tests are important. These tests are key. God allows them to happen so that when we leave the wilderness, we know we're ready. We can move on, and we can be who God has chosen us to be. And we can thank God for these tests. We can thank God that God allows these things to happen so that we do know that we're ready to meet the world as it meets us. Amen.